Hello YouTubers, Paul here, your channel host. Welcome to my channel. Well, I don't remember, but at the beginning of the week, if you have a look on the video below this one, or to the right of this one, which is my left, you will see that I mentioned that I had a couple of things planned this week. Well, unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, i.e. the weather, because it's actually chucking it down here. Well, it's been chucking it down all night and it's just miserable at the moment, it's drizzly at the moment. And one of the trips I was supposed to be going on tomorrow night was a dolphin trip through Northern Experience Wildlife Tours. If you want to have a look to see what those trips were like, have a look on the playlist Northern Experience Wildlife Tours. It's playlisted on my channel. And just a glance pulling that face up there. So yes, so I'm gonna, but tonight I've got another thing that I had planned this week. Just heading down to it now, Tyne Idols, which is the bus that I sometimes go on. And tonight the ex-producer from the Tube, which used to be from the TNT television, Chris Phipps, he's actually doing a tour based on his book of TV and film locations on the northeast. And as you know, YouTubers, I love TV and film and behind the scenes, so I think it'll be quite an interesting tour for us. So I'll hopefully vlog from the bus, and I'll see you later, YouTubers. See you, alright? Yeah, take them over. Is that what it is? Yeah. Good.
And with that stirring introduction, a very good evening and welcome to this very special Tyne Idols special edition Forget Carter tour. So welcome to you all. Oh, your enthusiasm is overwhelming. You know, over the years, when I've been writing and particularly talking about media and particularly film and cinema in the northeast, I always average an irate member of the audience who says, you know, Newcastle on film particularly and television isn't just all about rain-sodden streets and cities. Well, tonight it is, and if anybody who's levelled that criticism at me, I hope they're on board tonight, having paid their ticket money. As some of you will know, some of you won't know, my name is Chris Phipps. I'm the author of a book entitled, coincidentally, Forget Carter, which really, as this tour will do, pay tribute and homage to the extraordinary range of film and television that has come from this city and its surrounding area. And people never cease to be surprised by exactly what productions, particularly with a worldwide impact, have come from this area. Some of the locations we're going to visit tonight, you will already know their connection with movies and television. Some of them you may not. If this encourages you perhaps to, I don't know, look onto YouTube or via DVD of a film that you haven't heard of before that I've talked about, well, you know, hopefully I've more than done my job. But basically films and television, particularly drama, at the end of the day, they're all part of our heritage, as much as castles or parks. Also, they're very frequently a very important mirror of the times that we live in, or the times that we have lived in. And we're now going to head towards the site of, well, really what was an epic statement about the state of this nation, and that was Our Friends in the North. Very cleverly chosen soundtrack collection that was used on the drama series in 1996, Our Friends in the North. And of course, it's very suitable track because that's what the series by Peter Flannery in a way was about. It was about Nicky and Tosca and Mary and Geordie all interchanging and being affected by particularly the political promises that they made and were made to them about what was in store tomorrow, basically a better tomorrow, and the betrayals and the hopes involved in that. And we're coming up now to a very significant location in front of us, originally known as Crudders Park Flats. And of course, one can, when you do anything, you can never tell, you can never forecast the resonance that such buildings will have. Who would have thought, without Grenfell Court, there wouldn't have been the resonance that and the controversy that now surrounds buildings like this. Of course, these were built in the 1960s. They were named after I think, a former director of Armstrong's, Crudders, who lived on this site in a house called the Dean. Eventually, of course, the name was thought to be a bit sort of unsuitable, and has, I think, been changed since to Riverside Dean and various euphemisms like that based on local trees. These, of course, occupy a central role in Our Friends in the North. I remember when I was growing up, I'm sure you do, that high-rise flats were really seen as, well, the future. T. Dan Smith up here, who was responsible for building those flats, were all part of his vision of a new Brasilia, a city in the sky. And of course, it's where Tosca and Mary live for part of the series, part of the epic series. And of course, because Austin Donahue, who the Alan Armstrong character based on T. Dan Smith, because of corner cutting, a lot of building deficiency started to come into play, and a lot of dampness. And so what was seen originally as sort of the really symbols of progress and a better life suddenly became untoward symbols of corruption, reflecting obviously what happened to T. Dan Smith. I think actually T. Dan Smith did end up in his last years living, ironically, in one of those blocks of flats, either there or Spickle Tongs. I'm also told, and I didn't know this till recently, that when Dan was serving his time, he shared a cell with Leslie Grantham, and apparently encouraged young Leslie into acting as a career. So it's a small old world. Tottenham Flats we'll visit later on. It's amazing the number of times that Crudders Park Flats appear on television and film over 40-50 years since they've been built. In fact, I nearly renamed the book Crudders Park the movie rather than Forget Carter, because they never stop cropping up. I would recommend to you, if you haven't already looked at it, the BFI site, British Film Institute site on YouTube. That has on it a regional movie map, and it means that you can go to different parts of the British Isles, press on a certain section, and it'll bring up free viewing films to reflect your area. It features fictionally in Wire and the Blood. As you know, Wire in the Blood by Val McDermid is set in a fictionalised city, Bradfield, which is actually a cut together of Newcastle on the ground and Birmingham from the air. So it's a combination of the two. But Croddos Park again is quite recognisable. I interviewed Robson Green when he was making Wire in the Blood. I interviewed him for his 40th birthday for the Variety Club. And I was asked to go to Croddos Park flats where they were filming, I think it was a siege sequence. Someone in the flats was being besieged by a SWAT team. And obviously Tony, who he played, is involved with Hermione Norris in there. And what was extraordinary was there must have been about 15 men and women dressed in SWAT outfits with firearms, all milling around those flats at the shopping centre, and no one took any notice of them. No one. They went up, people just walked into the shop and out the garage. There was the SWAT team. So clearly SWAT teams are quite well known around here. Meeting the location manager for our friends in the north at Sage Gateshead. As we're coming into the sort of the Benwell area and the West Road area, any glances to the left towards where, well, the site now of the Metro Centre. Obviously, that is the look, basically from Get Carter. That was the where Frank Carter's funeral takes place. The street, Frank Street, appropriately, Frank Carter from Frank Street. The funeral sequence that was shot there, that street obviously is now completely demolished, and obviously the power station, which was opposite, that's gone, and obviously now we have the Metro Centre there. So you can get plenty as we proceed, I think, down Benwell Lane, and in any view left will give you an approximate of Frank Carter's funeral view. But we're actually on our way. We're going to pass West Road, Cemetery, Crematorium, Freudian slip. I haven't even had a drink yet at the first stop. We'll talk, and I'll talk a little bit about this. And of course, we are obviously, near the Benwell area here. And as we are here, people really forget the incredible role that Newcastle and the North East has spent and given to children's television. And of course, Benwell was the main location site for really what was the only true soap opera that has ever come from the North East, Byker Grove. Byker Grove was created by Adele Rose and the late Andrew Wanfer. Andrew Wanfer became managing director of Granada, having been MD of TNT's, and of course she was the co-creator of The Tube, which is the programme that brought me up here originally. When The Tube finished, they wanted to retain that independent spirit and create really a youth-based programme that would really break the mould, that wouldn't be full of sort of uncle or big brother or big sister figures. A drama that would be truly centred on all the matters affecting young people in many different ways. And obviously the result was the extraordinary long-running and successful series Byker Grove. And as many of you will know, it was filmed here, where we are now, at a former bishop's residence, a place called the Mitre in Benwell. The Mitre that I knew was a band venue. I remember when I was working on The Tube, going to see a couple of bands there who wanted to try and be on the programme performing at the Mitre. and then Zenith Productions took it over for Biker Grove, and 10, 12, 14 years, in the end the BBC actually bought it as a long-term location. Unfortunately, if we went by it today, you just can't see anything from the road at all. It's completely overgrown, and I'm very sad to say, is in a terrible state of repair. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't know whether it's going to be listed, whether it's going to be demolished. So the future of the Mitre is, I'm afraid, uncertain, but great memories of an incredible series where really young people were the centre of the action. It was the first teenage gay kiss on British television. Obviously, it launched the careers of Ant and Dec as PJ and Duncan, and also featured wonderful performances from Charlie Hardwick, who I think was either PJ or Duncan's mother, and then later on a youth worker. She reappeared. So I'll be talking about other contributions to children's television a little bit later on. Now, when we're going to be heading towards the iconic funeral sequence from Get Carter, there was a local outcry about the filming of the funeral, because the funeral cortege was seen to be leaving from the back of the house on Frank Street, and local people said that would just never happen. But obviously Mike Hodges, the director, found it visually more satisfying to film it that way, so that's why it was done. It's still an extraordinary shot, those streets all sweeping down to the Tyne. Incredible. And of course, none of those terraces, thankfully, in terms of being housing, are there anymore. So it's very difficult now to actually visit that site. It's said that the best role in Get Carter was the role of Frank Carter, by the fact that he was dead. And the body in the coffin was actually played by the producer's chauffeur, who apparently was very good at lying still. And if you think this is good, with the trees scraping over the bus, wait till we get to Coburg Street in Gateshead. Okay, here we are. Don't complain about not getting any special effects. This is what's called Sensurround. And there we have, of course, I think actually a rather beautifully designed mausoleum and area. I haven't seen many like that in places, the various cemeteries that are visited. And that's, of course, where Michael Caine as Jack Carter starts to follow and talk to Margaret after the funeral procession in an effort to try and find out what has gone on. And it's filmed, as you know, in an extraordinarily sort of downbeat, almost documentary style is the funeral, as is the rest of the film. And I think that's one of the great appeals of Get Carter, is that it looks as though it was filmed yesterday. And the reason for that is that Mike Hodges had a background in news and current affairs. He wasn't a drama film, he wasn't a sort of entertainment director. And the cameraman, Wolf Szczycki, try saying that on a drink, also had filmed a lot of documentaries. He made a film with Anthony Newley, which is worth checking out, called The Small World of Sammy Lynn. Thank you. On cue. It's amazing where these thoughts and suggestions come from in the ether, just when I need them. Yeah, The Small World of Sammy Lee, which is about a guy, I think he's got 24 hours to pay a debt off. It's a strip club in Soho. It's shot in real time, and Straczynski filmed that. And Hodges saw that, and he said, "You're the man that I want to film this gangster movie that I made, that I acquired the rights to." Called Get Carter. Wolf Straczynski, well, obviously Mike Hodges is still very much alive. Wolf Straczynski died at the age of 102 last year. His son, I believe, is an Oscar-winning cameraman as well, mainly for filming the Star Wars films. So it's obviously carried on genetics. Okay, we're coming down the West Road now, and it's going to be a question of yet another block of flats. We're nearly up to Fayetteville there. Actually, we should really consider ourselves lucky tonight. I did a tour on Get Carter for the cast of the Northern Playhouse cast and production team, and it was raining so much we didn't see a thing for 2 hours. It was steamed up more than it is now. And in fact, we created a new term, a new cinematic term, bus noir. But basically, Get Carter was made to justify MGM operations in Europe. MGM wasn't making any headway with productions here, and they needed a cash production quick. The producer, Michael Klinger, who had made some quite interesting films, mainly relating to strippers in the past, acquired the rights to Jack's Return Home, which became obviously retitled Jack's Return Home, retitled as Get Carter. And as you may well know, the book was originally set in Scunthorpe, Doncaster and the Hull area, but they decided not to film there after the wrecking. And Mike Hodges, the director, remembered that when he'd been working on Minesweepers during his naval service, calling in at North and South Shields, and remembered this area and thought it might be good to set the movie here. So when he took a taxi across Newcastle towards Shields, he realised that the city was very much changing. T. Dan Smith was tearing everything down, building his new Brasilia. There was the whiff of corruption with Paulson. This, he thought, was the place that Jack Carter should come home to. And in terms of the top 100 greatest British films ever made, thank God that he did decide to come here. Because I think with Get Carter, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. If it wasn't made here, people would moan because it didn't come here. And then when it is made here, people moan that it gives just one image of the North East. You just can't win. But for me, Get Carter as a movie, in terms of cast, music, director, story, it's a perfect story. It's a wonderful movie. Locations here. On the left-hand side, we're passing 3 blocks, one of which, of course, is Todd's Nook block. One of them I always used to thought was called Valium, but it's actually Vallum. And of course, these are, if you're a Likely Lads fan, you will know, but some people still don't realise that I can never remember whether it's opening or closing credits. There is a sequence of children playing in a demolition area, and through the archways, which I think are on Gloucester Road, over towards our right, it is in fact a view of the Todd's Nook flats here. These are not the flats in the film of the Likely Lads, 1976. That block of flats where Terry lives and does his milk round from, that was a block in Howden, which I think is demolished now. If we're looking obviously to our left, we will see glimpses of St James's Park, hence the sudden appearance of the Blaydon races. but also a link to our next stop with a variety and music hall links that I'm going to talk about. St James's Park, of course, is the venue for what I think is a really, really good movie, Goal. The screenplay from an original story was by the wonderful Dick Clement and Ian LaFrennay, and it's basically about a young Mexican boy's discovery of the Northeast and football. Now, sports films, like any niche film, are a difficult thing to produce because you've got to preach to the converted. Preach to the unconverted. If you, I come from a city, I think, of Birmingham, 4 or 5 matches. The only time I ever went to Villa Park was to see Barry White and Duran Duran. I thought I found Goal an incredibly entrancing film, visually and story-wise. It features the wonderful Anna Friel, who apparently commenced talking in Geordie from the day she got the job to the minute that she finished. She never went out of character. Wonderful sequences shot on the Long Beach at Tynemouth. Incredible CGI match basically shot there. And of course it is considered a fantasy film because Newcastle won. Okay. The Blaydon Races is also linking us into the world of variety and the music hall. And on the right, we have here, obviously, the wonderful Tyne Theatre and Opera House. This building celebrated its 150th anniversary this year. In 1919, after the First World War, it suddenly became a cinema. It was acquired by the great impresario and cinema owner Oswald Stoll, and it became known locally as the Stoll Picture Theatre. And I can already hear people laughing in a certain way at the mention of the Stoll due to the calibre of films that were shown there. Originally, I've seen incredible photographs. It reopened as a theatre in '77. I've seen incredible photographs of the way that films like King Kong and Tarzan of the Apes were promoted here, with huge statues of King Kong on the front of the cinema. I think the first film shown here was maybe Tarzan of the Apes, I think. And the very last film shown here was Danish Bed and Board. Now, on August the 13th this year, I will be screening here 2 iconic Northeast movies, The Clouded Yellow, which I'll be talking about later, and a film called The One and Only, written by Peter Flannery. And my guest at that screening will be the creator of George Gently and our friends in the North, Peter Flannery. So that's August the 13th at the Tyne Theatre, all afternoon and evening, you lucky people, and it's all part of 150th anniversary of the cinema years there. It was the first cinema ever to show talkies in the Northeast. The Station Hotel on our right. When Stormy Monday was directed by Mike Figgis, as many of you remember, there's a sequence in there where the American flag is thrown to the floor in there. And apparently Tommy Lee Jones and the rest of the American cast all walked out in disgust because I didn't know, but apparently the American flag is never to touch the ground. I didn't know that rule applied. And if you look at the different type of gritty gangster films that have been made in Newcastle, Stormy Monday really is on a par with The Long Good Friday, because it's about the attempt for foreign criminal interests to acquire interests in Newcastle. Mainly, of course, trying to get hold of the jazz club run by Philly, played by Sting, which I think was an inspired casting by Mike Figgis. Mike Figgis, who directed Stormy Monday, is a Geordie. And as he wrote in his notes about the film, he basically wanted to make a tribute to film noir himself. And he said, you know, why do I need New York or Chicago for bridges and water? I need my home city. That is true city of film noir. That's where I need to come. And so that's why so much of the film is so stunningly filmed. And most of it was filmed really in the magic hour, the twilight hours, but also in the very early morning. And it had a very interesting cast. It had Tommy Lee Jones as the rather mysterious mobster who's trying to take things over here. Sting, who was of course at the height of his career as a pop star, actually for once given a good opportunity to act in a meaty part. Melanie Griffith as the gangster's mom. Apparently her son had never seen a sheep prior to coming to Newcastle. Sean Bean, as a young guy working for Sting, one of his very early parts. I think the part was originally meant for Tim Roth, but for some reason he didn't get it. So Bean got it instead. And in case we forget, there was a very, very good television prequel series to Stormy Monday called Finney, which is the backstory. That features basically the story of the criminal family, of which Finney is one member. His other brother, who's a complete lunatic, is played by the wonderful Andy Serkis. His last TV role prior to playing gorillas and golems. And I think all the acting honours in the series go to Melanie Hill, who obviously is the ex-wife of Sean Bean. Melanie Hill basically plays the godmother in it. If you get a chance to see this series, it's very difficult. A lot of these series now are very difficult to get on DVD. I had to get a copy from. I actually got a copy from Melanie Hill herself because it isn't available here. And obviously, all round here is the set for Stormy Monday. I think a lot of civic dignitaries were rather perturbed at the bottom here, at the bottom of Dean Street, when the film opened to see French sailors fighting over prostitutes on the corner here. On the left, of course, Haytonside, that's first floor is where the Finney's Jazz Club is. First floor there, my first flat when I came to Newcastle 35 years ago. And of course, the Tyne Bridge dominating everything. And of course, the Tyne Bridge is first seen in the first movie ever shot in Newcastle, 1939, a movie called On the Night of the Fire. Catherine Cookson movies, TV series filmed to the right in the cobbled streets behind. 55 degrees north, HMS Calliope on the left. I'll talk about that later on. We're going over the Swing Bridge where Carter buys his heroin. I always think Jack Carter's a cross between the Count of Monte Cristo and the Terminator. High Level Bridge on the right, where we'll be going a little bit later on. I mean, it is really extraordinary, just the amount of visual checking points for movies and TV just here. And we'll be meeting someone very shortly who's put a lot of those location and films together. The Guildhall and Exchange over there, obviously used in the Likely Lads movie. Also where Carter is picked up in that rather nifty Sunbeam Alpine and taken over to Gateshead. We're now approaching Sage Gateshead. If you watch the opening episode of 55 Degrees North, starring the rather wonderful Don Gillet and the wonderful Dermot Kerwin, there is an incredible chase sequence in episode 1, which is in fact the first ever use on British television of parkour. which is that incredible facility to jump up and down on walls and buildings, something which I haven't partaken myself. Okay, I think we're going into the Baltic entrance here. So please leave as much as you can on the coach. There's an opportunity here if you wanted to buy drinks at the bar or in the cafe, and I'd ask you to assemble here in the front of the concourse to meet one of our guests tonight, Christine Reeve, who is one of the country's leading location scouts and location managers. Everything from Billy Elliot to our friends in the north. And we have to be back on the bus at sharp 8:15 to keep on time. Thank you.
Locations, the use of classic locations in Newcastle in the North East. And I'm really pleased for her to be sparing her time to come and talk to us tonight. As I say, one of the industry's leading, not just location scouts, but location managers. Everything from our friends in the north to Billy Elliot. Yeah. So, please welcome, at great expense, Christine Reeve. Right, I've got the advantage of the clock. Very good, right. I think the simplest way to go about this is to go from one location to another. So, tell us first of all about your involvement in our friends in the north, and particularly that classic scene with Geordie Peacock at the end.
Right, well, I was taken off the three final episodes of Our Friends in the North. Freelance, so I came in right at the end, and I had to organise these three iconic episodes, which were actually still a period drama, almost even then. And the one that everybody remembers is Geordie Peacock walking across the Tyne Bridge, the actual final shot of the whole series. And it fell to me to actually organise that. Fortunately, I already knew where we were going to shoot it. Most of my job is literally going out and finding every kind of alternative or visual image you can think of for extremely demanding directors. But it was written for Newcastle and it was written for the Tyne Bridge. And it was a very, very complex shot because it involved stopping all the traffic on the Tyne Bridge, which is extremely difficult to do. I don't know if they do it anymore. They allowed us to do it. The police are fantastic, or still are here. We had to do it within certain time restrictions. Otherwise, obviously not in the rush hour. But just to complicate everything, the director wanted to have a crane on the bridge, actually on the bridge, so that when you walk past, you've got the crane shot looking up across him and then out over the whole of Newcastle. And to get the crane on the bridge was a 5-hour rigging job. You can imagine the health and safety and all the rest of it. And I've got everything in place, the police allowed us to do it. And if you imagine then, people like Daniel Craig, most of the cast were complete unknowns. They were just starting out. They were sort of known, but nobody knew that most of them would become absolute international stars. So it was fantastic that police and the council allowed us to do this, right? Especially as, if you remember the actual script, it's quite controversial. I'm using a very diplomatic word in terms of the history of the Newcastle City Council and everything else. So they allowed us to do it, and we didn't have to stop the traffic while we were rigging. We only had to stop one direction of the traffic, which the police did at great expense. But when they actually came to rig the arm onto the crane, everything had to stop. And I've done this job for a long time, and I was sort of in the middle of my career then. And I've been working with the police officers all day, and you can imagine that a lot of the drivers on the bridge weren't very happy about all this anyway, let alone the public. And the police officer whispered in my ear when it came to stopping the traffic in both directions, "Would you like to stop the traffic on the Tyne Bridge?" Yes. Oh, so I'm getting excited to see. And I was there. And I said, yes, please. So I've got the memory and the sheer power of literally standing out and giving the signal to all the police, putting my arms up and stopping the traffic on the Tyne Bridge for about 5 minutes while they rigged the train. That's that story, and also, I don't know if you want me to carry on, but I'm sure you all remember the wonderful Tuxedo Princess, or the Tuxedo Royale. Now, don't ask me which one it was, because the guy that owned them kept changing them for various dubious reasons, so we were never quite sure, but we did a lot of filming with them on lots of different productions, but there's also a scene where he looks down onto the top of the boat, of the ship, so we had to rig that up as well. So simultaneously with the bridge, when we actually came to film it, we'd spent the whole day and the whole night before rigging that scene on top of the ship. And also we had another crane and lighting on the ship. So where you're seeing now was an absolute hive of activity. We parked, all the unit parked here in this car park, which is HMS Calliope, who were always very, very helpful to us for actually getting the vehicles in. And the whole thing was virtually done in one take.
Before we have to depart, tell us very quickly about The One and Only, which was a film written by Peter Flannery. Shows Newcastle in an incredible, wonderful visual light. It couldn't do that well at the box office. But tell us about, is it the Baltic was being built?
Yes,
or was it the Millennium Bridge?
Both of them.
Quick, tell us, yeah.
Very, very briefly, it was by Peter Flannery again, who wrote Our Friends in the North, the same director. And it features a guy that builds kitchens, just an ordinary guy, and his favourite building is the Baltic. And he sits and he looks at it, and the Millennium Bridge is actually in the process of being built. And the Peter Flannery had written scenes looking at the Baltic, and then the final scene, the wedding, was going to be at the Baltic. That's what the director wanted. The Baltic was an empty shell with construction work like you wouldn't believe. And so I don't like heights, and we ended up going up and down, went up and down in the the sort of exterior lift. It's just like a cage. And what we did in the end was we actually recreated the restaurant months before it was there. There was no floor, there was no ceiling. They got some windows in, and the art department actually created. If you see this film, see it. It's a really good film. It was slated, but it's a really good film. Fantastic. Because I mean, it's we all recognise that, but it's just if you want to see Newcastle at its best. And where you can see, if you look there now at the Baltic, you can see the top, which I don't know if it's now the latest film. I really can't remember. But when I stood up there was nothing. There was just scaffolding. And so the entire crew of 40, all the cast, a band, 50 extras, everything else had to be shipped up on the outside crane. And the construction people with Gateshead Council, in order to keep continuity, actually shifted all the real scaffolding from pillar to pillar in order that we had continuity. And they did that for us for 8 weeks, because every time we came back to look at it and talk about this wonderful building, which was supposed to be complete, they had something going on in another place. The Millennium Bridge wasn't built, and we had to recce that. We were allowed to recce it. It was the strongest winds of the year, and we had to hang on to it, and it was terrifying. And in the end, we had to give up and actually have the meeting afterwards in a porter cabin while they were building the Baltic. So I've had some amazing experiences, but my God, what an advert it is for Newcastle. It was the only film ever that I've been asked to work on to make Newcastle, quite rightly, look that it's being regenerated. The brief was to make it look like Paris, New York, and any major European city, and that was wonderful, because I was fed up. It really did, and I'm fed up with constantly being asked. I am from the south originally, I've been up here for 40 years, but they all think it's wicket handbags and popples up here, even now. And so it was absolutely fantastic to be able to promote Gateshead and Newcastle.
And finally, you worked on an overlook film, Song for Now, and we just passed Tyne Theatre, and the choir concert was there. The outside was the Theatre Royal. Was it?
It was the assembly rooms.
Assembly
The
rooms.
assembly rooms, the bottom West Road. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I didn't ultimately work on it, but I looked for locations for over 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And the goalposts kept changing, but yes, my favourite theatre room that they filmed back in there. And that's a wonderful film, but you need your handkerchief.
Well, as I've said to you before, you should write a book.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Christine. Okay, well I'm very grateful to Christine Reed for coming to talk to us, because she actually has to go to Yorkshire now. Her mother's not very well, so she's having to leave. She basically was able to fit that in for us, so we would have had a longer time. She has so many incredible stories to tell, and of course she has actually lived the life. She's done what it says on the tin in terms of working on locations. She has the most amazing. She worked on the long-running Cookson series, and also most famously worked on Billy Elliot. Another football film, which I think is vastly overrated, or underrated, I meant to say, is Purely Belter.
Yes.
The story of two young lads, two young tearaways from not very good backgrounds, using any method possible to raise money to buy season tickets for the match at St James's. The irony, of course, was that the two young actors who played the parts were actually Sunderland supporters. They, I think, do a very good job, and I actually haven't seen them in anything since. The film was directed by the same director as Little Balls and Brass Stuff, and was dismissed as being a bit of a sort of socialist feel-good film, but I don't agree with that. It is quite a touching film. There is a wonderful performance in it by Charlie Hardwick as one of the boys' mothers, once again proving her acting, what a remarkable actress that she is. And to think that she and Robson Green both began in a way on film in Amber Films. Okay, we're passing on the left the site of the iconic concrete brutalist car park. And of course it's a cue for music. Ian Carter is of course this music composed by Roy Budd. Roy Budd was a jazz piano prodigy. Interesting guy. His wife was a woman called Caterina Valenti, who was the first real sort of European pop star, Italian. Roy Budd's theme is interesting in that it doesn't use conventional percussion, it uses tabla, played by a wonderful session drummer called Chris Caron, who I think is still alive. The rest of the Roy Budd trio, including Roy Budd himself, are no longer with us. And Roy Budd never really lived to see the incredible impact that his music would have. It was really Mike Hodges who got him to really extract the very basic sort of electronic, almost neo-industrial notes in the theme, and the rest of the score is well worth listening to. In fact, I can never get on a train and arrive in Newcastle from wherever I've come without this music in the background in my ears. Such is the impact. Of course, a lot of Roy Budd wrote a lot of film music. He also wrote an original score for the Phantom of the Opera, The Lon Chaney Silent. He also wrote music for films, a Richard Roundtree movie called Diamonds, and a lot of his work today, as with many composers, is sampled by other DJs. But of course, he died, I think, 40s, early 50s, I think from cerebral hemorrhage, and he never saw the impact of the legacy that he would leave. Now we are heading to a location from Get Carter that still exists. It's the location of what was known as the Las Vegas Guest House in Coburg Street here on the left. Why was it called Las Vegas? Well, Mike Hodges basically rewrote Ted Lewis's original novel. He took out the first person narrative and he researched local crimes. He researched the Angus Civet murders up here, and I think he visited La Dolce Vita a few times as well. So he really saw Newcastle and the North East really as the Vegas of England, and that's why the boarding house is called the Las Vegas Guest House. Of course, we all remember the landlady who says to Carter, "If you're the travelling salesman, I'm Bloody Twiggy." Now, there is a very, very famous sequence in this. It's probably the first ever. It's the first ever appearance of telephone sex in British cinema, where he makes a call to Britt Ekland, and all the while that he's speaking to her on the phone, the landlady is rocking back and forth on her rocking chair, increasingly fast as the conversation proceeds.
Oh boy, here we go.
Would you believe that rocking chair only disappeared from this premises last year? There's a gentleman who lives next door, or a door up, who had frequent conversations with Kane during the film, because he kept... Don't be alarmed, it will not harm you. It's only the butterfly of love.
Part of the fun.
Now look, we're going to a lot of trouble here, so I want everybody to look to their left in a minute.
Oh, there's all the men looking at you.
Looking for number 25.
Number 25.
And the number we're looking for, ladies and gentlemen, eyes down please, for number 25. That is the site of the original Vegas Guest House. And also, some of the original light fittings are still in there as well. I don't wish to disappoint anybody, but I won't be reproducing the naked shotgun scene. That's a much more expensive ticket. I am told by one of the people living down here that he was actually wearing a body stocking. He wasn't stark naked.
27.
Five, ladies and gentlemen, the Las Vegas Guest House. Don't complain that we don't give you the full experience on Time Idol. Okay. And of course the field opposite here, which is now school, was where the marching band was rehearsing in the film. And of course this is the extraordinary chase round the back of these buildings, where George Sewell gets locked in the netty. And then of course there's a chase at the back of these buildings, which mysteriously suddenly turns out to be the Oxford Rooms at the end of the street. Outside the Oxford Rooms, uncredited, is a young Ginny Nail leaning against the wall. The band that are playing in the dance hall, Jack Hawkins band, were a very, very popular, I suppose you'd call them Northern Soul dance band now. They made an album called, I think, Psychedelic Sally, which is highly collectible.
They would dig a little hole like this. We've got to pick that.
I knew it was around here, but I hadn't realised it was this street.
In terms of its impact, because when it was released, it didn't do that well. It was released in an interesting year for crime films. In the same year, you've got Dirty Harry, you've got French Connection, and you've got Get Carter, and you've got a very interesting film with Richard Burton called Villain, which was written by Dick Clement and Ian LaFrennay. And really, criminals were now seen in a very, very realistic light in films for the first time in '71. Get Carter didn't do well here. It got buried, I think, at drive-ins in America. There was a black exploitation version of Get Carter, which basically is Get Carter, but it looks as though it's been shot negative. You can't get it even on DVD. It's called Hitman. And then, of course, there was an appalling remake featuring, strangely enough, Michael Caine, who re-emerged from the dead, Sylvester Stallone and Alan Cumming. Though to his credit, Sylvester Stallone, I believe, did support the campaign to retain the car park here. But obviously even Sly wasn't powerful enough to prevent its demolition. We're now heading towards the beginning of the Tyne Bridge in Gateshead. Just as we get onto the Tyne Bridge, just as we approach it, look to the left where the Central Bar is, which is an amazing, as you know, coffin-shaped or sort of wedge-shaped building. That street appears in Women in Love by Ken Russell. It's where Gudrun is saved from rather rough characters by Alan Bates' character, opposite what was called the Half Moon Hotel. If you look down on the left now, in fact we're actually going through it by Tyne Idol's magic. Building on the left doubled as the Half Moon Hotel in Women in Love, courtesy of Uber director Ken Russell, when he had a budget to spend. Right, the flats on the left feature in a movie filmed 5 years ago with Melanie Hill and James Bolam, a film called Unconditional. Brilliant movie. I think will become a cult movie in the future. It deals in a way with the transgender issue, and the shots of Newcastle nightlife are absolutely dazzling. Directed by a director called Bryn Higgins, and again, it's not. Unfortunately, it's just not commercially available on DVD. I had to get a copy from the director before I could see it. A little voice is telling me it's on Daily Motion and it's free. Okay, well, over to Mr. Daniel Craig in a very ill-fitting wig and glasses as he crosses the Tyne Bridge. You know what's coming next.
You've never been, but all the things that you see slowly fade away. So I start a revolution from my bed. Cause you said the brains I had went to my head. Step outside, summertime's in bloom.
Talking about Purely Belter a few minutes ago. Purely Belter was issued in the same year as Billy Elliot, and the distributor said, well, you know, we've had one Northeast story about little boys, we don't want another one, so they buried it. And I think it's really unfair, but that is cinema for you, and that was the power of the distributors. There's also a very interesting film shot in and around Wallsend in the dry docks called, I think it was based on a Lee Hall play or story called I Love You, Jimmy Spud. But it was made into a very unsuccessful movie starring, it's basically about a little boy whose father, played by Ian Glenn, is dying, and he appeals to the angel Gabriel to save him, and the angel Gabriel dutifully appears in Wallsend in the guise of Billy Connolly.
Oh, right, yes.
And as one reviewer wrote, is it Angel Gabriel as Billy Connolly, or is it Billy Connolly as the Angel Gabriel? I'm not quite sure. It does have actually some quite moving moments. Unfortunately, Lee Hall told me that he didn't like the way it was interpreted after all the advice he'd given, and he had his name removed from the production. But it is worth seeking out. Some of the shots in the deserted shipyards are quite incredible. But before I talk about the Likely Lads and whatever happened to the Likely Lads, on the left, of course, we have the area known as Shieldfield, and that, of course, is where a great deal of Billy Elliot. I'm cracking up. Daniel Blake, who I have a terrible penchant for getting names wrong, and I used to keep calling it Daniel Barker for some reason until my publisher corrected it. Daniel Blake filmed over very much in the area to the left, but we'll be going past one of the locations a little bit later on. Okay, well, we're coming to Oostburn now, which obviously has experienced incredible sort of regeneration, and is this sort of community arts creative hub area, and very good it is too. And we're going to be taking what is euphemistically called a comfort break here, and you've got a choice of pubs, obviously including the Clooney, which is a former whiskey bottling factory, and has played host to the most amazing musical gigs you could ever come across, including the New York Dolls, who actually passed this bus one Sunday lunchtime when we were parked, but refused to be photographed for the Tyne Idols press book. But there's a lot. The Likely Lads, of course, if you look at what I call the emancipation of the Northeast on the screen, the movie that puts the Northeast on the map is really, I would say, Payroll, then Get Carter. But on television, it is the Likely Lads that really puts the Northeast on the national map, and eventually puts the Northeast accent and dialect on the map as well. Prior to that, the only non-Queen's English accent acceptable in the media, on radio and television and the screen, was Lancashire, because of its sort of comedic links with Gracie Fields and George Formby. But the Likely Lads, these beautifully crafted observations on life through two post-war lads, played by Bolam and Buse, are not sight gags. They're basically comedy-infused dramas. That's what they are. This is the tune that brought me 35 years ago this year, here, the Tube. Just before I talk about the Tube, the Likely Lads film, which was made in 1976, if you look to the right here, In the early part of the film, Bob and Terry are playing a football match with some lads, and it's all originally shot on the right-hand side. There are still some archways and places as evidence of the buildings. It's also where they pick up the dartboard from the demolished Fat Ox as well. That's the coming up now on the right, where the Hotel Divan is on the right. Anyway, we're coming onto City Road, the site of the legendary Tube Studio at Tyne Tees Television. And I only recently noticed that there is a new development planned here, which is actually called Tube Court. So I'm very glad at last that some acknowledgement is going to be made. And I think we deserve a blue plaque as well, like the Club of Go-Go deserves one, for the amount of entertainment worldwide that came from it. And I think we're going to settle opposite the Tube site for some stories. The Tube, of course, ran from 1982 to 1987, co-presented by Jools Holland and Paula Yates. An incredible chemistry of presenters. The great thing about Jools and Paula was that they weren't like other pop shows, pop stars who were trying to resurrect a new career, or they weren't DJs having to perform in front of a television programme as part of their contracts, like on the BBC on Top of the Pops. Jools had this sort of insider track record with other musicians, and Paula, of course, was the first tabloid gossip style presenter. Both of them were on the inside track, and both of them really, the Tube is indivisible, I think, from Jools Holland and Paula Yates. So, where the undergrowth is now, the small building just up ahead on your right is the furniture showroom, which eventually became Tyne Tees Television. The wall that you're looking at on the right facing you now, there was a passage going up the side of there, and in the 1960s the Animals were filmed there for Tyne Tees Television, singing Baby Let Me Take You Home and Gonna Send You Back to Walker, to a load of screaming secretaries from the typist pool at Tyne Tees. They mimed rather badly, but it's a wonderful performance, and it was recalled recently by Hilton Valentine when he played Cullercuts last week or the week before. So to the right we have the site of the former Studio 5 Tube Studio, where everybody from Chaka Khan to Elton John to Duran Duran, you name them, they played there. And then of course there was the Egypt Cottage, which was affectionately known as Studio 6. I well remember some visitors to Newcastle walking into the pub to buy a drink and realising that Ozzy Osbourne was propped up against the bar in a coffin. Needless to say, they drank rather quickly and left. I don't know whether it was Ozzy or the look they got from Sharon. I don't know which of the two drove them out. Then, of course, there was a pub opposite called the Rose and Crown, run by a legendary licensee called Jimmy Butterfield. Miles Davis, probably the world's greatest jazz trumpeter, after he'd been interviewed by Jools Holland, went in there with his manager, with his legendary golden trumpet strapped to his holdall. Jimmy Butterfield took one look at the trumpet and said, "You're not getting that thing out in here and playing that." Don't forget, this was the man who, when he died, had bollocks and flowers on the side of his coffin going down Dean Street. So that was Mr. Butterfield. But the Tube really, like all music programmes, was very much of its time. It was a reflection of its time. It was the time of MTV, the time of New Wave, the time of the promo video being very, very important, the time of Michael Jackson and Thriller. And a lot of London production companies and record companies were astounded that this company in the northeast of England should be given the prize of the flagship rock show for the new Channel 4. But what style, what incredible independent style they did it in. We nearly lost it twice because of certain profanities issued off air but were on air. But the show is an incredible achievement, and there's never been. People say to me today, "Oh, is the Tube coming back?" Well, it couldn't come back because it's not the 80s. It's not the right time, and also budget-wise, it could never be made. And the way that we consume music now and entertainment has completely and utterly changed. The Tube was the last appointment to view that people made, sitting down 5:30 Friday night to watch the show. Now on board, we have a very special guest, the man who was the charge hand, the chief props charge hand for Tyne Tees Television, and a great friend of Jules Holland, Billy Clark. Now, Billy, give us one of your wonderful Tube stories, because they are legion.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
More important, can you see me? Chris has just mentioned about Ozzy Osbourne, and I did that show at the back of the Egypt cottage. I had to light all these candles, and we had a well with a coffin in, and I was putting dry ice in, and Ozzy Osbourne was blonde then, and he was fastening his cloak, and I'm lighting all these candles, and I could smell burning, and I realised my jeans was on fire, and I was standing like Ozzy Osbourne looking at me, and I couldn't say anything to him. He's a big lad. But anyway, the Tube was a fantastic thing for me. That was the happiest place I ever worked in my life. I was there about 23 years. And another thing with the Tube, Tyne Tees sponsored a night race at the Newcastle races, and I had a sidecar because Jules was mad on motorbikes. I had a motorbike and sidecar outside the studios, and we had 12 minutes to get from Tyne Tees here to Gosforth Park. So they got a police patrol car, and I'm sitting in the sidecar. I was odd job. You know, we pull a hat. I didn't say a word for 5.5 years. My wife was pleased, right? But anyway, I was sitting in the sidecar and the policeman got out the car, and I thought, what's he out the car for? And he came to me and he says, which is the way to Gosforth Park? And he had the big patrol car. I said, you're joking. He says, I'm not from here, I'm from Sunderland. And I went like that. I said, all I can do, I said, when I'm sitting in the car, the sidecar, I says, you know, turn left, straight on, turn right. And it worked, and we got to Gosforth Park, and I had all the stewards lined up, and I had to run with Jules, and it was Robbie Coltrane was a bootmaker. You remember Robbie Coltrane, Cracker and all that, and last, was it, the kids thing? And we got there, did the bit, and we're coming back, and we got in the sidecar, Jules kicked it over, and he's racing off. And somebody had put a chain across the road, and Jules didn't see it, and I hit him, and he just looked, he says, what? I said, look, he skidded, we would have been cut in two. We came back here, and Robbie Coltrane standing outside on a cigarette, and he said, would you like to drink, Wally? All Scotsmen never call me Billy, they call me Wally. Why? I don't know. And I says, a double whiskey over there, they killed there, you know. But anyway, that was the Tube, and I mean, there's a few stories, Chris will know, but we're cut for time. Another great programme I did was Supergram.
Hey!
17 months on that. And one of my classics on that, we got the time off, I mean we took over time, it was Chiselton. And I had a canvas zebra crossing to roll out from the Gibraltar Rock pub, across the other side. And I was standing, I rolled it out from one side towards Gibraltar Rock, gaffer taped it, got to the other side, I'm checking like that, and the car stopped. So I went like that, and I walked across the zebra crossing, and never said anything. Went up to do the filming, came back to straighten it out, and I stood there, two cars stopped, one each way, and I went like that, and I knelt down and I rolled the zebra crossing up. Another classic was, we used to have a production, it used to take 10 days to do an episode, one episode. And I went to the production meeting and they said, we'll get you a pair of wellies, Billy. I said, what for? They said, you've got to go in the sea and hold the boat still for Ian Cuthbertson, Alan Snell and Brian Lewis. I said, wellies is no good to me. I said, I've got to have waders. So, cut a long story short, they got me waders. I'm behind the boat, keep it still. And the director said, further out. Further out. and the water literally was up to me, and I said, I'm 4'11". And they just said, well, we'll have to stop, you know. And then when we got a break, I said to Brian Lewis, who was the next boxer, he was the one that never spoke in Supergram. And I said, I'm soaking. And he picked me up, tipped me upside down, got me up, and threw me back. And I'm standing there. Do you want any more, Zanny? Another one we did in time of, there's a vet still there. And I had to hang a stuffed corgi on a bracket outside the vet. And I'm out ahead hanging it, and this woman with a dog going into the vet. She says, that's bloody disgusting. I said, what are you talking about? She says, putting a dog up there. I said, it's a vet. I said, there's one there for the barbers, one up there for the hairdressers. I said, I'm off here. She said, I still think it's bloody disgusting. She didn't realise I was probably the clue, you know. We went into Lowe's stores and we were doing a pre-Christmas show, June. And I'm hanging the Christmas lights in Lowe's stores in Kyneham. And this old woman came, I'm saying, oh, that she was probably younger than me. And she came in, she said, hey, what are you doing? I says, well, I'm old and I'm slow, and by the time I finished, it'll be Christmas. She says, oh, that's all right, son. Anyway, I hope you have a good trip. And tell your friends to come on the trip.
Hang about, look out for Supergram.
Right, well, obviously, I'm very grateful to everybody who's bought a book, because the book does fill in the extraordinarily huge gaps that are missing and need to be filled in. You just can't cover any, enough, as you know, in 2 to 3 hours. When we were in Jesmond, obviously, I need to talk about the incredible contribution to children's television and CBBC made in this area. And also in Jesmond, and it's actually, you can't get near it now, and it's mainly demolished, is the convent school and building known as La Sagesse, or La Sagesse. And obviously that for many years, not actually, the interior of the convent was used for interiors, but it was actually the priest's house, which was a converted farm cottage, was used as Tracy Beaker's home, care home, the dumping ground. And now I see that La Sagesse is nearly completely demolished and is going the way of everything around there, executive housing. So there was really no point tonight in going there. Obviously, and what is interesting is the dumping ground, Tracy Beaker, and now Wolf's Blood, which is the most successful CBBC production of all time worldwide, is all made up here. And it is made really by Zenith Productions, who in some way and originally made the tube. Okay, Moorgate Carter coming up on the left. On the left, we're coming to Sallyport Crescent. It might be difficult to see now in the fading light, to quote Amber Films' title. There is sheltered housing here on the left, which I think was the first council-built housing in Newcastle ever. Sallyport Crescent, it's on the left. Have we passed it? Well, if you have been listening to it but have also missed, as I said, after Beyond Our Ken. However, we're not missing on the right-hand side the boarded-up entrance to Manners Station, which of course is where Kane, as Carter, follows Margaret down the steps with a friend after a game of bingo. That's all boarded up, but Manners Station still operates. I think 2 trains stop there a day on the way to Malton. It's a really eerie place to stand, I can tell you. Okay, we're coming now right up to date to the location for I, Daniel Blake. Shieldfield, which we passed, was where a lot of the locations were shot by Ken Loach. But soon we'll be coming into John Dobson Street, which is where Daniel Blake makes his iconic stance to the effect of changing the music on the bloody answering machine in the office and waiting for his appointment. As you may or may not know, the film in which Daniel Blake is played by the wonderful Dave Johns, who of course was an established stand-up for over 20 years here and the rest of the country, plays the part of Daniel Blake. And it's basically the heart-rending story of his navigation or attempt to navigate the benefit system in this country, and also a young family that he becomes involved with as well. If you haven't seen it, I do urge you to see it. It's almost compulsory viewing. It's not an easy view, but that's because reality and truth aren't sometimes easy to stomach. Ken Loach is a wonderful filmmaker. I had the privilege of working with him many years ago in Birmingham in a film called Prostitute. And the thing with Ken Loach, when he makes a film, you don't know whether it's a documentary or it's a drama. You don't know whether it's real or whether it's not. It's a wonderful fine line between the two. Now we're going to turn left here up John Dobson Street on the right. And of course it's difficult to recognise now because it must have been covered with white paint for the film, is where he sprays his messages to the office and the job centre. Also there was a lot of filming in the library here as well for it. And it's the first time that Ken Loach was ever filmed in Newcastle. And he told me, in an albeit brief interview, that as a city, he's never come across obviously he loved the community spirit here, he loved the dialect, but also he said that he hadn't come across many places where poverty and ostentation exist so graphically side by side. He said he could see in Eldon Square people who had nothing side by side with people laden with shopping bags from the latest Phoenix sale. And it's this, obviously Loach has this incredible passion for inequality, making a case for inequality, and it is a wonderful film. And then of course, ironically, at the same time that Loach was making I, Daniel Blake, Transformers: The Last Night was also filming here as well. Now, the world's most expensive, fastest cars were raced up Grey Street and round the corner. Now, I watched Transformers 2 days ago. I sat through 3 hours of metal crunching mayhem, and the scene isn't in. I think parts of Alnwick Castle are in, with the sequences involving Anthony Hopkins. Anybody who can make sense of the film at the 3 hours, I would like a written explanation, please, to me on a postcard. But I was really disappointed. I thought, obviously, they would cover the scenes with massive CGI, but I don't think it's in there at all. So I think I shall write a letter to Michael Bay and say, what happened in Newcastle, Michael? Maybe they're saving it for Transformers 6. Who knows? At the Tyne Theatre and Opera House, Sunday, August the 13th, I'll be showing The Clouded Yellow, and I'll be showing the one and only, which Christine was talking about earlier. And my guest will be Peter Flannery, who created Our Friends in the North, wrote The One and Only, and also wrote most of George Gently. I haven't, there are so many drama series I haven't been able to pay tribute to here, like 55 Degrees North, which was really before Luther, the first drama series to include an Afro-Caribbean lead as a policeman. Very, very good series. Written by a man called Tim Prager, who went on to write Silent Witness, a lot of Silent Witness. Very, very good. this all started, where Jack Carter gets off the train and orders a beer in a straight glass under the stare of the man with 2 or 3 thumbs, whoever he was. And of course, the pub that he walked into, obviously the Vic and Comet is used as well. The pub that he walks into is no longer there. It's on the corner here, and it was known as I think locally as the Long Bar or the Lang Bar. Station Hotel was where Kane and Ian Hendry rehearsed their lines, and Hendry chased Kane round the room all the time in a state of alcoholism. So, right, I have to really start thinking about winding up this Forget Carter tour. We still have various books on sale downstairs to tempt you before you leave the bus, and other goodies as well, badges and drumsticks and all sorts of things. I really have to thank you all for coming this evening. I really have to thank people, particularly who travelled incredibly long distances to come on this tour, ranging from Hampshire to Keswick. I really hope that you feel rewarded and that you've enjoyed it. I hope that I've pointed out some films to you that you don't know about. I've really enjoyed the brief conversations I've managed to grab with people, and I've just really enjoyed your company over the past 2-3 hours. And I'd like to thank Billy Clark, Christine Reeve for making it extra special, and I'd like to thank Paul and Julie and Andy and Steve and Keith for, as usual, doing a sterling job manning the bus. And as they say in my part of the country, ladies and gentlemen, it's been my pleasure, but chiefly yours. Thank you.
Well, just got in from a Tyne Isles tour. If you check the videos below this one or to the right of this one, you will see that I was going on the Tyne Isles tour, and you will also see all the videos from it. Sorry I didn't actually vlog from the bus, but as you can see, I've got plenty of footage from the bus with Chris Phipps talking, and can I just say he's a very, very informative guy. He knows a lot about the TV and film industry in the Northeast, and highly recommend Tyne Isles. I've been on quite a few tours now with them. Keep an eye out if you do a search on Google for Tyne Isles. I think it's tyneisles.co.uk. I could be wrong, or tyneisles.com. Could be wrong. One of the two. Do a search on Google anyway, it'll come up. Click on the website and see what tours they've got coming up. And yes, I will see you later.